All right, with 3 minutes after 5, I think we're ready to get going. First of all, everyone who's joined us tonight, thank you for joining our Town Hall, Minnesota's 2020 Conservative Clean Energy Recap. On behalf of the Minnesota Conservative Energy Forum, I'd like to welcome you all here tonight. MnCEF, we advocate for clean and affordable clean energy options and advancement based on our core principles like economic opportunity, Main Street jobs, property rights, and personal stewardship of our environment for our children and grandchildren. Let me just briefly introduce myself. I'll be your moderator tonight. I'm Adam Seidel, Executive Director of MnCEF. We're grateful that you're all taking your time here this beautiful evening we're having in June in Minnesota. I would like to thank our special appreciation to our two guests as well, the two senators who have joined us, who I'll now introduce. First, a bit of organization though. We'll start off here with some discussion back and forth between the senators and myself. We will have time near the end of this for participants to ask questions and constituents to ask questions of the senators as well. So in order to do so, to submit a question, please look at the bottom menu bar here on your Zoom screen if you're on either your smartphone or on your computer, and you should see a button that says Q&A. If you click there, you can type in your question and then submit it. We will be asking questions a little bit later on, so we'll get to as many of those questions as we can as time permits. Please note that this is the Q&A button and not the chat button. We will not be monitoring the chat button, so if you submit a question there, we are likely to miss it. So make sure that you are using the Q&A button so we don't miss your questions. On to our special guest, starting off with Senator Dave Senjem from Senate District 25, which is portions of Olmsted and Dodge counties in southern Minnesota, including big portions of the city of Rochester. Senator Senjem is a lifelong Southern Minnesotan, including a career at Mayo Clinic in environmental affairs management. After serving in several local offices in his area, Senator Senjem has represented the area in the Senate since his election in 2002. In the Senate, he has served in multiple positions of leadership, including time as both Senate Republican majority and minority leaders. And currently, he chairs the Capital Investments Committee, responsible for the state's bonding and public works project appropriations. He is also the Senate author of the Clean Energy First legislation, which we will be discussing tonight. Welcome, and thank you very much for joining us, Senator Dave Senjem.
Thank you.
Our next guest is Senator Jason Rarick from Senate District 11, which extends along the border with Wisconsin, along 35W, from areas as far south as Pine City, and areas even south of there up to Cloquet and the surrounding areas, west and southwest of Duluth, including much of Pine and Carlton counties and many other areas in that portion of the state. First elected to the Minnesota House in 2014, he was elected to the Minnesota Senate in a special election in 2019. Senator Rarick has consistently served on environment and energy committees in both bodies since his original election. And as an IBEW electrician by trade, Senator Rarick has been active in policy areas around job growth, job retention, electricity policy, and energy efficiency policy, which has been an area that receives significant contribution by our electrical workers in the state of Minnesota and other installers. This legislative session, Senator Rarick authored the Energy Conservation and Optimization Act, the ECO Act, you'll hear us talking about later on in this session, in the Minnesota Senate. And so with that, welcome and thank you for joining us as well, Senator Rarick.
Thank you very much.
Again, we will, just a review, we will ask for audience questions later on in this, so please consider going to your bottom menu on your Zoom screen on either your computer or your smartphone, and make sure you click on the Q&A button to submit questions and not the chat screen, and we'll get to as many of those questions as we can later on. So as we get into this with the two of you, I just want to start very broadly, before I even ask you to discuss your individual bills, and just on your individual thoughts on how the regular legislative session went, a very unusual legislative session, but particularly in the energy area, your impression on this session in general. And I'll start with Senator Senjem.
Well, thank you, Adam, very much, and thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. No question about it. And I've been in this legislature for 18 years. There's nothing will ever compare to this year from the standpoint of disruption, disturbance, difficulty in terms of just process with the advent, if you will, of the COVID issue. It disrupted, again, the whole process of government here from the standpoint of having committee meetings, even commingling with each other. Virtually the Capitol was shut down. People went home to some great degree. Thank goodness for Zoom, no question about that, but it's not quite the same. So with respect to energy, it incrementally made energy bills more difficult and every other bill more difficult. We struggle with that. We had our Zoom hearings. We plodded ahead, but I think generally speaking, the pace of the legislature was so slowed down and so otherwise difficult to operate in that a lot of the things we hoped for did not get done. Just had the new word is bandwidth. How much bandwidth do you have to use to accomplish your goals within a limited kind of process that you have to work in? So not everything we wanted to, but again, we've experienced something in life that I hope we don't have to experience again. It's we look forward to another year and moving forward.
Senator Rarick, do you share Senator Senjem's thoughts?
Yeah, one of the things you're told every year, that every legislative session is different and unique, and this one was definitely unique. And again, like Senator Senjem said, hopefully we will never have anything like it again. The process became very difficult. I really like walking over to other senators' offices to discuss issues, to try to work on making bills better and coming to agreements. And we lost that this year. And even to work with staff, everything was over the phone, over Zoom calls. It just made things so difficult, and it slowed the process down. And I think there were a number of things that could have gotten done under normal situations this year. We just lost that ability, and we're learning now. Hopefully, if something similar would happen, we know how to approach it at the beginning and can function better. But it was difficult this year, and unfortunate to see so many things fall by the wayside that could have and should have gotten done this year.
It did seem like in some ways we had two sessions this year, where the start of session that was a more normal feel until mid-March hit, and things did change for quite some time. I want to jump in now and ask both of you about the major clean energy legislation you both authored this year, the Clean Energy First and ECO in the Senate. And I'll start off again, with Senator Senjem. Just at a basic level, what is your legislation all about? What is Clean Energy First all about?
Well, Adam, you want the long answer or you want the 5-minute answer here?
The long answer is good.
All right. So let me just start with my long answer, because it wasn't always this way in terms of my interest in this particular subject. I came into the Senate in 2002, was privileged to be on the Energy Committee in those early years. I became minority leader, and then when you're minority leader, you need to give up some of your committee assignments to new people that want those slots, if you will. And so I stepped aside from energy for some number of years. In 2011, though, a woman by the name of Sabina Engel from the University of Minnesota walked in my office, asked me if I wanted to go to Germany to study energy. And at first I kind of rejected the whole idea. It sounded like entrapment. It sounded like illegal. But I checked it all out, and it was legal financially. Grant from the German government paid about half, and I paid the other 1,000 or 1,200, something like that. And so I went, and I saw a country that was on the move in respect to energy and energy transformation. And I didn't like it right away. They were closing down 17 nuclear power plants and going to clean energy. They're invoked, if you will, a feed-in tariff. The electrical rates were around 30 cents a kilowatt. Didn't make any sense to me, at least, in the homes of Siemens and Bosch and Mercedes and BMW and everyone else. How could you do that to a country? I didn't understand it. I went back though a couple more years, and I gradually come around to believing that, maybe they're the smart ones. Maybe they're getting ahead of the curve on this. And I became gradually more interested in this whole movement, if you will, unfolding within Minnesota. And so I grew with that. And about the end of the 2018 session, a couple of people from the Center of Energy and Environment came into my office, and they presented me with this thing called Clean Energy First, this idea. And at that point in time, our renewable energy standards, we were about met. I mean, those standards like 20 by 25 and 30 by 25 for XL and so on and so forth, they were met. And where are we going to go forward? And I became ever more interested in this bill because it wasn't a bill about bumper sticker stuff like 100% by 2050. It was a bill which incrementally would take us there, working through the resource planning process that utilities are required to participate in with the Public Utilities Commission, and actually set forth a process to move us towards a cleaner energy future in Minnesota. And that was attractive. And in a way, though, I have to say, of course, we're Republicans, and we're not supposed to, if you will, people think at least, we're not supposed to believe in clean energy. We're not supposed to believe in cheaper energy, and wind and solar, cheapest kilowatts you can buy. We ought to believe in cheap energy. We're Republicans. We certainly agree on secure energy, and that's what you find, generally speaking, with respect to renewable energy and of course healthier energy. And so, I mean, why? You don't have to be Republican or Democrat to agree on every one of those things. And so it was easy for me to again take out the Republican shield, if there was one, and say I don't need it. Certainly in this area, and move forward. But so what this Clean Energy First bill does, it takes us from a largely, I'll just call it a dirty energy future to a largely cleaner energy future, and it's a future that I see as from the standpoint of energy, at least. If you're in the legislature, I just believe you have to see the future. That's fundamental with any legislator that I know, at least a good one. You have to be able to see the future, and if you can't see the future with respect to clean energy, then you are a little short-sighted, and I won't go any further on that one. But I think you have to see the future, and certainly clean energy is in our future. And I just come to believe that this Clean Energy First bill was the vehicle that might take us all to the future, and I still believe that. So it recognizes that there's a pace to this. It's not an overnight thing. It plods along. It's methodical. It works through the resource planning effort with respect to utilities and their interaction to the Public Utilities Commission. And I'll basically get into the bill in a minute. But it is a methodical sort of approach, and I think that's important. It recognizes, and this is something that I've thought about well before the Clean Energy First people walked to my office, and that is, pick your date, but somewhere in the mid-2030s, most of the utility plants that are providing us electricity at this moment in Minnesota are not going to be operating. And even some of those outside of Minnesota, most recently now the Great River Energy Plant up in North Dakota announced a shutdown, a coal-fired plant, middle of the coal mines, if you have the lignite deposits up there, right in the middle. Transportation is virtually costs nothing from the standpoint of relatively speaking, and yet that particular coal plant is no longer economically viable for Great River Energy, and they've announced it's going to close down. So things are happening here, and things will continue to happen as permits come up on our nuclear power plants. Will they get extended? Will they not? Is XL interested in moving them into an extension? They are with Monticello, at least for now. Maybe not so much with Prairie Island, but I'm in a very roundabout and long-winded fashion saying that our power plants are in great respect not going to be here in much beyond 2035 or 2040. And so here we are at 2020. What are we going to do about it? And if that doesn't promote you into a clean energy future, then you need to probably think twice about that. So the whole idea of our energy future, no longer relying on the conventional power plant systems that we have right now, is something, again, I believe everybody needs to think about. And then I think we also need to think about the whole body politic and what they're thinking about energy. And I won't go into all the polls, but if you get into them, you'll find out Republicans, Democrats, Independents, by wide margins. Republicans at about 2/3 agree that we ought to be moving towards a clean energy future. Independents a little higher, and the Democrats a little higher than that. So the polls tell us where we ought to be going, and we ought to, you don't just hold up your finger and read the polls every day, but it is an indication of what our future is and where it's going. So So anyway, let me just, can you flip that slide up, Adam, on the Clean Energy First bill? And I'll just try to work through it a little bit.
Yes, I can.
Okay, there it is. I'll just try to move this through this for the audience somewhat quickly. I would also say, before I get into this, I have this kind of fundamental belief as well. As we think about clean energy and a clean energy future, what can it do for Minnesota economically? And we go back to the computer industry, we go back to Sperry Univac, control data, the early genesis, if you will, of computerization in our country and our world happened here in Minnesota. You talk about medical device industry. 25% of the medical device industry in the United States of America is based in Minnesota. And so technologically, we are a strong technologic state. And I just happen to believe as we move into a clean energy future, and there's a lot of technology is going to be involved here, why doesn't Minnesota pick up the torch or the banner, so to speak, and be part of that? And we can be a better part of that if, in fact, we do have legislation in place which is driving our state towards a clean energy future. So that's important too. But let's just take a look at the bill, at least in diagrammatic form. It starts, as I mentioned earlier, with the utility on the left there. It needs to file a resource plan with the Public Utilities Commission. I believe it's every 3 years, or certainly periodically, telling the Public Utility Commission where it's going with respect to its energy needs, whether it needs more energy, whether or perhaps they're going to close a power plant down and they're going to have to replace it. What kind of energy are they going to use? In any event, they file these resource plans. As they do this, then the public utility or the utility, investor-owned, and by the way, this is an investor-owned bill, applies only to them. The investor-owned utility has to prescribe that they're going to replace their energy with respect to a closed plant, or replace or add energy with respect to new needs based on a clean energy option. So it's a clean energy first bill, and so it prescribes that clean energy is the first option with respect to fulfilling new energy needs that they might have. And the options are on the screen here. It can be nuclear, solar, wind, hydro, carbon sequestration. We get into, I can't read it so well, but municipal solid waste. And then we added geothermal to that, deep geothermal as well. So the utility needs to go forth to the Public Utilities Commission with this clean energy option as their first option relative to their new energy needs. There are off-ramps, though, and that's what made this bill, I think, particularly attractive to me. Those off-ramps have to deal with affordability and or reliability. If the utility company cannot make that clean energy option affordable or reliable, the utility, or pardon me, the Public Utilities Commission can excuse their need to rely on that clean energy option first. So we have affordability and reliability off-ramps. They're going to be somewhat difficult to meet. There's no question about that. But with respect to reliability, in many cases, that might be transmission. I might be the issue that prevents reliability from occurring. If that, in that case, again, the need for that that clean energy can be excused. In addition to that, there's 4 little circles there. The bill talks about the transition planning for communities, a Prairie Island, a Monticello, any community with a large power plant. That power plant pays a lot of taxes. It's a large part of that community. The bill prescribes the assistance by the state of Minnesota to that community during those shutdowns. An additional issue there with respect to a need that the bill covers is transmission planning. If we're going to have more wind and solar or other methods of renewable energy out in the hinterlands, it's got to get to market. And so there's a need here within the bill that prescribes a study for transmission planning to allow, again, that clean energy future to occur. Also within the bill, there's a requirement that the energy as it's created, the new clean energy, wherever it might be, will utilize local, if you will, and local is described as 150 miles, local employees first, from the standpoint of employing Minnesota people. That was important to the unions that have seen all too often at these sites cars from Texas and California and so on coming to Minnesota. So it does give an option, or at least a requirement, that the developers are developing these sites that use Minnesota people first. So that's the essence of the bill. It's been through the Energy Committee twice. We had a hearing in Finance towards the end of this session. I think it's a good bill. It's got I think a legislative future, and I look forward to, we're going to introduce it again in the special session and keep it alive and keep moving on this. Persistence is everything within this business, and we're going to make clean energy first, or a variation of what we have here, the law of the land in Minnesota, hopefully in the not too far distant future. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. And I'm really excited as we continue on in this to discuss the difference between, because the two bills we're talking about here tonight really come at clean energy from the two different sides of the coin. But before we get into those differences, I do want to give Senator Rarick a chance to go into the same depth on your bill, the ECO Act. What is your bill all about? What is the ECO Act all about?
So thank you, Adam. A simple statement, the basis of the ECO bill is much needed SIP reform for the municipals and the co-ops, but it also looks forward to include technologies that are emerging right now, and it moves us from a program that was originally designed to spend money and educate people on conservation to a program that's truly focused on conserving energy. And for many people that aren't involved in energy, so many of these things go over the top of their head. And I know Senator Senjem has worked incredibly hard, and so many people don't understand what the Clean Energy First bill is about. But I think, with the ECO bill, the Conservation Improvement Program, or SIP, has been around for a long time, and people understand maybe they've got a rebate check when they bought a new refrigerator or upgraded their furnace. So they somewhat understand what SIP is, but I think this is taking us to the next level, because originally this program, there's a requirement that the electrical utilities spend money to make the program work. And they've been doing it for over 20 years now, and they're getting pretty good at it. But the municipals and the co-ops, they've done a lot of the projects that can conserve energy, and they're starting to struggle to figure out, well, how do we continue to move forward? And so one of the things that I really like about it is taking the load management and being able to include that. And so if you have a water heater that shuts off during the day and then heats overnight, that's what we're talking about. Or air conditioners that will cycle on and off so that not everybody is running their air conditioner during the peak period. And that truly does save energy and make sure that we don't have to build facilities just to cover these peaks. It spreads that peak out. And so that's a huge part of this bill, to allow for that to count. And then, like we said, we're looking at the new technologies that are coming. I truly believe, storage is the next piece that's needed to move wind and solar and some of these other renewables to take the next big step. And this is looking forward to say that as those technologies emerge, that instead of the legislature constantly having to come back and pass something new to include them, we're trying to look forward and show that they can be included ahead of time. And so that's how we drafted the bill, to try to incorporate things like hydrogen technology and that to be able to count. And I know many people are worried in the section of the bill around fuel switching, but we looked at that over the last year and how to try to ease people's minds that if you're not going to be allowed to fuel switch from a fossil fuel to electricity unless you can prove that it's cost effective to do, that it's going to actually reduce emissions and that it's going to be cheaper for the customer moving forward. So someday we're going to get there where, you know, electricity is going to be the cheaper mode and people are going to want to move that way. And this bill is going to have those issues already pre-addressed. And that's the other thing that I hope people understand about it as well, is we're seeing society make changes because they want to, and we're seeing technologies emerge to be able to provide cleaner and cheaper energy. And that for me is always my goal, cleaner and cheaper. And I think this bill gets us there because it removes that mandated spend. If our electric utilities can meet their energy conservation goals, they're no longer required to spend a certain amount of money. So if they can do it because society is just moving that way and they can do it without rebates, they'll be able to. And that to me will help bring energy costs down.
So Senator, that last part, you're saying the basis is, rather than a metric of you spent X amount of money, it's based on meeting conservation needs and saving customers money based on more options and choices rather than just an arbitrary amount of money.
Correct. You know, right now, if you can meet your goals and you've only spent a fraction of the money that you were required to, the law still says you have to continue spending that money even though you've met the standard. This bill would say if you're meeting that standard, you no longer have to spend X amount. You only need to spend, you know, what is needed to actually get there and meet your savings goals.
Senator Rarick, I'm wondering, your bill dealing, compared to Senator Senjem's bill, which is, as he described, is focused on the power plants and the generation side, which is, you know, where that electricity comes from. Your bill focused on the user side, what's in the home. There's a lot of jobs, over 60,000 jobs in clean energy in Minnesota. And what a lot of people don't realize is that many of those, tens of thousands of those jobs, are on the efficiency side. The electricians, installing more efficient fixtures in homes, better electricity systems in large buildings and commercial buildings. Has your background as an electrician, who are one of the types of the workers executing this stuff, and among those tens of thousands of Minnesota workers in energy efficiency, is that part of how you got interested in this in the first place?
Absolutely. When I was an apprentice, I worked on a project at the 3M complex. This was one of the original ideas, but all the old lighting used a lot of energy. And back in the 90s, there were a lot of corporate offices that were replacing their old ballasts, and with new energy efficient ballasts and the T8 fluorescent lamps, they used, you know, only about 25% of the energy. And, you know, we had almost 30 electricians working on replacing all of the lighting in a building for about 2.5 to 3 months. And the energy savings paid for that entire project in less than 2 years. So you could just see that efficiency not only saved the company money that did that, but it then made Xcel or whatever electric utility it is had a reduction in their energy usage, which meant they didn't have to build a new power plant, as we see our population growing and electric use actually increasing. So we're having more people, we're using more electricity, but yet everybody is reducing the amount that they use so that we don't have to build these big, expensive power generation plants. So they go together. By you being efficient in your home or by a business becoming more efficient, we're helping reduce the number of power plants that are required and making it more possible to expand on the renewables. But again, you know, as the technologies come forward, we're going to see these opportunities and potential really start to show itself. But it all comes together as one. You can't do one without the other.
Senator Senjem, Senator Rarick just touched on a point, or his answer, I think, illustrated a point that you touched on as well. And I'm curious on both of your answers on this, but I'll start by kicking it to Senator Senjem. Senator Rarick, you just talked about some very specific things that you were installing as far back as the 90s, and you threw out some different models of different types of fixtures, and it gets very technical. Energy efficiency certainly gets very technical. Senator Senjem, your bill is all about the IRP process at the Public Utilities Commission, and in energy we start to toss out these acronyms, and there's a lot of engineering that goes in. Has that been a challenge for you as you explained each of your bills, and starting with Senator Senjem, to your colleagues, and how do you you break these things down for your colleagues and for folks who aren't working in energy day to day and aren't sitting on energy committees?
I think that's true, and it's. I think Senator Rarick and I would both suggest that it even happens to us. I mean, so we work in the energy world here. I'll just give my example. I don't work in the Health and Human Services world, even though I was 40 years at Mayo Clinic. But the acronyms, the language, the policies, they're all different. And when I, if you will, waddle into those areas from the standpoint of needing to at least know basics, it's a little harder, and you have to kind of know the nomenclature. You have to know the lineage, if you will, about how all these things work. And likewise in energy, we use terms that probably those people that are more directed in other aspects of legislative life don't use, and they have to get used to it. So we have our own languages in all of these areas, whatever they might be. You get into the tax committee, and again, it's a refined set of regulations that are large and complex, and so we talk differently there. But it's the nature of legislative life, and it's incumbent on each one of us, I think, to do what we need, what we can, and what we have to do to ensure that we do come about understanding this to the best of our ability. But I would just say, with respect to clean energy first, to me, it's so ultimately logical. You don't need to go too far to, in fact, embrace it. If you look at where this country's going, it's all about, amongst a whole bunch of other things, it's all about a clean energy future. Clean is better than dirty. It's that simple in some cases. Clean is better than dirty. And as we look at emerging technology that Senator Rarick was talking about, we can't even imagine, in my view, I can't at least, what electricity and the electricity supply system will look like 50 years from now. I don't think it's going to look a lot like what we have today. I think technology is going to emerge. It's going to change it a lot. And I think we need to change with that change. The only thing certain in life is change. And that's certainly true in the electrical industry.
Senator Rarick, do you agree? Do you find that it's just par for the course of the legislature in discussing these technical things with your colleagues?
Yeah, we tend to focus into subject areas, and you trust and you rely on your fellow members who have focused on different areas, that they'll be able to explain it to you and help you understand what you need to know. And I know that can be a challenge. And with folks who have not participated in the Energy Committee, it can be complicated. And that's why I have tried to focus on that as one of my issue areas, because I can use stories from my background to try to help people understand where we're going and how they can relate to it maybe a little bit better than just throwing out all the large terms and the acronyms and such. So, I try to trust a number of members, and I hope they're trusting Senator Senjem and I when we bring these energy bills that are very complicated to them.
Well, let's talk about some of those other members this year. At the start of this session, both of your caucus's leadership, the Senate Republican majority, and Paul Gazelka placed clean energy and clean energy first and other clean energy priorities as part of the top 5 or 6 priorities for the session for you and your colleagues in the Senate. And I'll start with Senator Rarick. How was that a critical start to the session as this work progressed, and how did that shape the session going forward?
Yeah, it's always important to make sure leadership understands and is supportive, and that's one thing I'm Also very appreciative, Senator Osmick, who is the chair of the Energy Committee, has been very helpful in trying to move the bill forward. And, we have a hearing on it again tomorrow, trying to help explain to members just what we're doing and to try to keep it moving forward. So, it's definitely something that you always work with your leadership, the majority leader and the chair of your committee, because if they can get behind it and support it, then that you can keep it moving forward. And I think, yeah, that was very important at the beginning of the year to know that there was support and we were going to have a good chance. And again, it was unfortunate circumstances with the COVID-19 and such that I think really derailed getting these bills done. But I do believe we've got moving forward. Just they sometimes take more time than you wish they would, but I do believe we have the vast majority of our members on board and ready to support both bills.
Senator, I'm glad that you brought up Senator Osmick. I had a question here prepared in advance for Senator Senjem as well about both of your bills. Senator Osmick, who is the chair of the Energy Committee, of course, in the Senate, was very involved and helpful in both. And on Clean Energy First, a lot of different partners working together on that bill with you, Senator Senjem. And of course, Senator Osmick was one of them over the course of the interim. He and many other partners and negotiators who had influence on the bill. What was that process like with so many different groups and individuals influencing the bill? And do you feel that process was an improvement or a challenge?
Well, it certainly was a little bit of both, but I would certainly give credit also to Senator Osmick. He's been wide open and frankly just supportive of moving forward in this direction in every respect. There's no question about that. We, as I mentioned earlier, the bill went forward in 2018 in terms of introduction. We let it incubate to let people look at it and get a sense of what it is. We had a hearing in 2019, passed out of the Energy Committee then, and then we went into interim, and we worked again to try to make the bill better from the standpoint of those people that had issues with it. Okay, what's your issue? And can we make that issue go away, so to speak? And therein, Senator Osmick was very valuable in terms of helping to orchestrate that. So the bill did get some additions to it. And then for some people, those were additions which solved problems. For other people, they were additions which created problems. So it's always a balance and trying to find that sweet spot, as you say, that moves you through and gets a particular piece of legislation passed. But there's a lot of different ideas or people with ideas that surround the Capitol, and a lot of different interest groups. And again, some like certain things, some don't like certain things, and that's the nature of legislation, whether it's energy legislation or anything else. But Senator Osmick has been valuable. Looking again at the bill. Again, working to find the path. That's what we're trying to do, working to find the path. And I'm confident in time we'll do that. There are forces out there that don't want us to go in this direction, and particularly the Clean Energy First. And I don't get this because I've studied this heart and soul for months, almost years. The idea that clean energy is going to be more expensive. There's no evidence anywhere that I know of that would support that, but yet that's a rock that gets thrown in the path of legislation, and you have to prove otherwise and reprove and reprove. It doesn't wear you out necessarily, but it frustrates you over time. But we'll work on it. Experience will tell us that in fact many of these things aren't true, and again. To any extent, whatever is wrong with the bill, the dominating part of Clean Energy First is that it is our future. It is what people want and people expect, and hopefully we'll deliver that bill at some near future time.
Well, just for the participants again, we will have an opportunity for Q&A here in just a few more minutes. There's already a handful of questions that have come in. A reminder that you can ask your questions by clicking the Q&A button in the bottom, the little menu bar there at the bottom of your Zoom screen, either on smartphone or on computer. If you joined us just by dialing in, unfortunately, you won't be able to submit a question this way. But make sure you do use the Q&A button and not the chat button. We will not be monitoring the chat button, so make sure you submit your question via Q&A so we do see it. Before we get to questions, though, I want to ask both of you, start asking about, obviously the regular session is over. I'm not going to ask about special session predictions or anything just yet, but we might get to that a little bit later on. Both of your bills made significant steps through the process in both bodies, but in the Senate as well. And starting with Senator Rarick, how do you keep this momentum up going forward on your bill, and what is its movement meant towards just the general thought process around how conservatives think about clean energy in your legislative body?
Yeah, well, the one thing, I think part of the reason Senator Senjem and I have been working so long on both of these bills is we have such a wide range of people interested in energy, all the way from, environmental groups to the large industrial companies that use energy, and such a wide range of groups and ideas and opinions that it can be very difficult to get through and make everybody happy. And you're never going to make everybody happy, but you try to come to a consensus on what is right and what is going to work best for the most people. And I think as we've been doing that and having these discussions, I think it has been clear to many people on both sides that clean energy is something that people want, and we need to be able to conserve where we can, how we can, and it makes sense. That's the thing. I mean, conservation saves money in the long run, and I think that is, again, energy is confusing for those who don't truly dig into it and understand all the intricacies, and so it's basically an education for those unfamiliar, and again, working with all of the different stakeholders to try to, for those who are opposed, to make as much concession as you can to help them understand we're not out to try to ruin any other industry because of our pieces of legislation. We're not trying to just drive away anybody. We want everybody coming in. We want everybody participating in the process. And that's maybe one of the hardest parts, is you think you have everybody on board, and as you're getting to that last moment, all of a sudden here comes a group that hasn't been involved, and they throw in something and are concerned. And as a legislator, like Senator Senjem said, that can get frustrating. It's part of the process. But I think those conversations have been good. And I think the more we have included, Republicans especially, that they are really starting to see the potential of the technology that is coming and the benefits of moving towards those, as it can be, like we said, cleaner and cheaper for everyone.
Senator Senjem, you said some of those same things earlier on in this town hall, and you made the comment that you specifically want to keep the momentum going during special session. I won't full-blown ask either of you for predictions about the special session that I think everyone expects coming up, perhaps on Friday. But Senator Senjem, do you have, what do you intend to see momentum occur during special session, or for that to be an opportunity for continued conversations on clean energy?
I'm going to reintroduce the bill in special session, hopefully on Friday if the reviser has it ready, and I do that again to, if you will, keep the dream alive. I don't want to have that bill, if you will, appear nowhere until January of 2021. That's too long. I want to have a viable bill through the if you will, the special session, however long that takes, whether it's a day or two or whether it's a month or two. Whether it gets a hearing or anything like that, we'll see about that. But just having it there, having it before the legislative process, if you will, I think tells my fellow legislators that Senjem hasn't gone away, that this bill is not going to go away. It's going to stare you in the face, and it's going to be there, and we're going to work on it. So that's the persistence of a person who wants to get a bill done. So we're gonna do that. The special session will certainly involve my other life here in terms of capital investment. There's a lot of conversation, of course, now about what's happened in the last couple of weeks relative to the Twin City area and all of that, and equity and things like that, which are certainly important subjects. And I suspect that's also going to be part of the conversation, a larger part of the conversation, perhaps energy, for sure, as we go into special session.
Senator Rarick, the same question. Do you have any expectations for special session?
Well, I as well am going to be submitting the bill during special session. And again, I appreciate Senator Osmick is having a hearing on the bill tomorrow. So, I've been continuing to work with the groups since session ended. We have a couple of other ideas, some potential amendments we can add to the bill. So, I am hopeful that if the amendments can bring that peace in the valley, so to speak, that there is a potential yet for special session for this bill to get done.
Well, thank both of you. I want to have a chance for some Q&A here because we've got a whole bunch of questions that have rolled in front of us here. So we'll take a few minutes here in the time that we have left for some questions from folks. And I'll start with one right here. This is this individual did not leave a name, but the question reads, I'm an anesthesiologist from Rochester who's on my hospital's Green Committee and a member of the American Society of Anesthesiologists Environmental Task Force. And this is a question for both senators, it looks like. Do your bills have bipartisan support? What is the support across the aisle for both of your bills? And it's from Rochester, so I'll start with Senator Senjem.
Well, I mean, it certainly passed. My bill passed twice out of Energy Committee with bipartisan support. That's good, and we just simply know by virtue of the people that we work with up here that there is bipartisan support for this. Maybe not quite enough yet in terms of 34 votes, but it's moving in that direction. And so, yes, I mean, this bill is certainly supported by people on both sides of the aisle.
Senator Rarick, your bill has a similar version moving in both bodies, so I think that you'd like an opportunity to answer this question as well.
Yeah, absolutely. This bill has very broad bipartisan support. The chief author in the House is Zach Stevenson, a Democrat from the metro area. So, this one has not only bipartisan support, but support from all regions of the state and incredible cross-section of groups that are behind it, from business groups to environmental groups to labor unions. So there is tremendous support, and I believe we are really, really close to getting those final little touches done that, makes, again, not everybody's going to be happy and thrilled, but sometimes when everybody's a little unhappy, then you got something good.
Adam, can I just chime in one more? Since we had a Mayo person, as you look at clean energy first, you look at energy efficiency, whatever it is, organizations like, I'm going to presume this caller was from Mayo Clinic, but organizations like Mayo, 3M, Cargill, Best Buy, on and on and on, Hormel. I mean, all of these companies are in and of themselves as part of the Green Committee, but they're committed to a clean energy first kind of philosophy themselves, and are doing a lot on their own to within their corporations to make sure that clean energy is part of their ethic, part of their core value. In many cases, some cases at least, organizations like Hormel, like I believe Cargill, have actually bought clean energy options and rely on clean energy to produce their products. So it's an ethic, it's a code, it's a value that's persistent across this country by many of our major companies.
All right, we have a question here from Jay that says, understanding that renewables, and from reading the question, I think he's talking about renewable generation, can be physically seen and therefore look more like progress. What can the legislature do to promote efficiency on a free market basis? Efficiency measures create more jobs and return more money to end users than renewable. And well, Senator Rarick, your bill is about efficiency, so I'll let you take that one first.
Well, yeah, you know, that's one thing that I tend to not bring up quite as much, but, you know, the efficiencies do create a lot of jobs. You know, one of the things that my bill does is, you know, if you can re-insulate your home, make that better, you know, so you're going to use less energy. So that's jobs. Again, upgrading mechanical equipment, doing the load management so that you hire an electrician to come in and install that meter that switches you on and off. You know, I mean, that is another thing that is just so important to this too, because they're not the big massive jobs, so it's going to be local contractors that are doing that work. So correct, it's not as visible, you don't see it as much, but the impacts are just as big, especially for our rural areas, and that's important.
Senator Senjem, in your last answer, you talked about the market side of that question, the large corporate entities and hospitals and others that are taking part in this. Would you like the opportunity to expand in the scope of that question on the market demand for this?
Yeah, well, let me just kind of on the energy, it's sort of another bill that I don't quite have yet. I'm going to actually be talking tomorrow with somebody from the Department of Commerce about it, but it's the whole issue of building efficiencies. We currently, as we within our capital investment committee, as we build buildings around Minnesota, they're built at this point to a B3 standard in terms of building energy efficiency, and that's important. There are cities which would like to do that by choice in Minnesota at this point, and this is what this bill I'm going to be talking about. City of Rochester is frankly one of those that would like to, at least at the city council level, invoke have the ability to have building codes related to energy that exceed the current state building code, and currently they can't do that. It would be a local option, but a city that wants to do that by virtue of this bill could. So again, all of these things are moving in either energy efficiency or a clean energy future, and I happen to think it's, you know, obviously a good thing that, and I have no problems giving a community that option if they want it.
All right, I have a question from a Ben here that I think is entertaining because it gets right to the point of what's coming up over the next few months towards November. How will the Senate promote the Republican work on clean energy in the upcoming political season?
Senator Rarick? I don't care. You're the moderator.
Senator Rarick, Senator Senjem wants you to start.
So, well, I think that's going to be, you know, one, it's going to be a little bit tricky in this environment right now. We don't have fairs and community functions to get together. So I think we're going to be using social media a lot and events just like this to try to get the word out to everyone, what we're working on and just how important this work is. And so, you know, it's kind of new ground for a lot of us. It's different, but I still think can be just as effective as we learn these new strategies and, like I said, social media, Zoom, whatever the platform is. But that's going to be the key. And then not only that, but just talking with friends, family, neighbors, coworkers, and spreading what we're learning. I think that is kind of that grassroots way of doing it. And I think all of our members are going to need to be doing that as they as they understand it more and as we move forward. I think that's going to be kind of incumbent on us to make sure we are using the methods at our hands to get that word out to everybody, because it is the future. It absolutely is.
Senator Senjem, do you have thoughts?
Well, yeah, and we already do a lot of things. I've worked with Dr. Engel at the University of Minnesota, again, part of this German policy exchange program, but we go to Germany, we learn, we bring ideas back, and we've done a lot of work. We call it our Solar Farmer Group that goes around, especially in southern Minnesota, and we have forums like this, not on Zoom, however, in person. We talk about, again, agriculture and how, in fact, agriculture can promote renewable energy and things like that. We certainly do programs in Rochester on video down there, and cable video and things like that. I will certainly be very visible on my as we do our campaign lit pieces, those door cards as we call them. We'll certainly advocate at least my position on clean energy on that kind of a media, and you know, the television, the radio ads. I'm not fearful at all about again talking about clean energy and its importance to me from the standpoint of a policy within the state of Minnesota. So not afraid of it at all. Again, people I think want it. We need to talk about it. The more we talk about it, the better chance we have of advancing it. And so I look forward to, again, the campaign season to do this. It's a kind of topic I think everybody can appreciate. It's bipartisan for sure, and it's one that people are interested in.
Well, we have quite a lot of questions here left. We're not going to have time for all of them, but we have a couple more here that I do want to make sure we get to. This is from a Bruce, and it looks like it's for Senator Rarick. He says that Senator Rarick spoke of a standard to be met for your eco bill. What is that, and how will it be measured? Will it add administrative expenses for either the utility of the state? The idea of looking at output, energy conserved, rather than input, money spent, does sound sensible. So how is the administration? Talk a little bit more about the measurement it looks like.
Sure. So, you know, currently under the Conservation Improvement Program, every electric utility is required to make energy efficiencies on their system of 1.5% every year. So it doesn't mean they have to reduce the amount of electricity that is being produced or used. It just means they have to identify ways that they have conserved energy, because we know with population growing and such, energy usage is going up. But so there's a calculation that the utilities have, and they work with the Department of Commerce that calculate and figure out those efficiencies and what they're doing. And so not only are they required to have that improvement of 1.5% every year, but that's where they also have to spend 1.5% of gross sales every year promoting the program. So under this bill, the municipals and the rural co-ops will continue at that 1.5%, and the IOUs, which are XL, Otter Tail Power, and Minnesota Power, they'll actually increase to a 1.75%. But the big three, they're already at about 2% on a yearly basis. It's the munis and the co-ops that were having the problems meeting their 1.5%. But like I said, the great thing about the bill is if they can meet their standards, that required spending of the 1.5% goes away. So they would only need to spend what they need in order to make the program happen. And that is all under calculations that are done with the Department of Commerce. And like we said, that was part of around fuel switching, that the calculation is there. Is this actually lowering emissions? Is it cost effective? And is it going to be cheaper in the future? And if so, then the calculation bears out how much energy is saved and how that can be applied. And so then there's a formula for lighting retrofits. There's a formula for power factor improvements. So it's pretty complicated, but it is all done through engineering and figuring out calculations.
All right, thank you. This is a question from Peter. He says that he is a conservative Republican that is a supporter of clean energy, and he has seen, especially in Minnesota and the Dakotas, a positive impact of clean energy on economic development in those states. And he's wondering how you can help convince skeptical Republicans in Minnesota to embrace and understand the economic development of clean energy policy. Senator Rarick?
Well, I think, first and foremost, again, is just education and talking to people and exposing them to what we're working on. Again, whether it's just the simple lighting retrofits or load management, anything that can be done to improve efficiencies is pretty self-explanatory on how that improves not only what's happening with the grid, but how it can reduce costs. But then just also, I think the big thing we're missing is talking about the emerging technologies that are coming and the investments that are happening there and just the potential that is there, that we have to be looking at that, looking ahead and positioning ourselves to take advantage of those right when they happen. And I think if we can convince people to do some research, to look at that, they will see the potential that's coming. And I believe that's what will get people on board.
Thank you, Senator Senjem. Same question.
Well, I'll try. So it's how do we convert the skeptic? I would just kind of back up to something I've already said, and that is, truth be known, the major utilities here are on course to retire almost the entire fleet of power plants in Minnesota by the mid-2030s. So if that's the case, and if we don't act, it's going to be kind of dark in our homes and maybe cold as well. So we're obviously beholding to act. And so what is the energy future? If it's not fossil fuels, we're not going to probably build more nuclear plants. XL, they're just way too expensive. XL is not at all interested in that. And so then what's left? Is it hydro out of Canada? Maybe a little bit, but it's going to be that which you can get from the sun or the wind largely, or new technologies which might develop. And so I think you just have to think about those of you that might be on this audience that think they're going to be around here in 2035. You're going to want to get off that skeptical pedestal that you might be on, and you might want to just think about how you're going to power your appliances and everything else. How are you going to electrically power your life when there's no more major, if you will, conventional power plants there to do it? It's going to be a mix of wind and solar and anything else that comes along. Hydro perhaps, possibly some nuclear left, at least in 2035. But again, we're going through this transition, and that's what it is. We're going to transition our energy fleet, if you will, not only in Minnesota, but frankly across the world. And everybody's going to get caught up in it. As I often simply flippantly say, you can stand in front of a train if you want to, but it's going to run you over. And this energy transition that we're amongst, that's with us at the current time, is one of those trains that is coming, and it's not going to stop for a lot of things, much less a skeptic. So get on board and move forward.
Well, we do have quite a few questions left here in the queue, but we are a little bit over sort of our original goal for time here. So I apologize to those questions we weren't able to get to. I do want to just close, though, by asking each of you, summing up this conversation and summing up your thoughts, what is sort of the one bottom line takeaway that you want each of our attendees to come away from this conversation thinking about, and we'll start off with Senator Rarick.
I think the biggest thing to kind of take away that we all have to be looking at is our energy future is going to be different, just like Senator Senjem said. Change is coming. Technologies that many of us aren't even aware of yet that are being worked on are going to drive that future. And we just have to keep our minds open to them and watch as they come. I mean, I look at my grandfather and he would have never imagined ever that we would be holding a meeting like this. He couldn't have even envisioned it. And so it's the similar thing. There are things coming down the line that many of us couldn't even imagine today. And so we have to keep our minds open and be willing to at least look at them and try to incorporate them into our future. And the more we're willing to do that, I think the better our energy future will be.
Thank you. Senator Senjem, your closing thoughts.
Well, we're in campaign season. I would urge people in the audience that as their candidates approach them, wherever that might be in Minnesota or even outside of Minnesota, ask them about energy. Look for that candidate that's curious. Look for that candidate that can see the future. Ask them specifically what they think about the clean energy future, whether it's something they could support or not. I often say, and I probably said it already tonight, the good legislative candidate that I would subscribe to would be one that can see the future and can go there. I think that's just fundamental with any legislative candidate. You have to be able to see the future and be willing to go there, because that's just incumbent. Anybody that cannot see the future is probably not going to be the kind of legislator that you want, and it's that important. But moreover, I'll just say that as we think about this future, this energy future, we've all talked about how it's going to change, but we need participation by each and every person in this audience and well beyond. They can influence the future far better than Senator Rarick and I. We have, if you will, some people might call it power positions, but we're led by the people and the people's voices. So I would just urge everybody in the audience that's interested in this to be an active participant in your community, in your neighborhood, at the coffee shops. Talk about this, make it come alive, and it will move forward in a very natural sort of way.
Well, this would normally be the point in something like this where I would give the audience an opportunity to show their appreciation for the two of you for joining us here tonight. But we're on Zoom, so you can't hear their applause. I'm sure they're all applauding loudly at home in their houses or wherever they're watching from. But from those of us here at MnCEF, to Senator Senjem and Senator Rarick, thank you both very much for your support on clean energy issues as well as your time here tonight. So thank you. And with that, we are at our conclusion here for tonight's town hall. Thank to all of you who have spent your part of your evening here with us, diving into these issues. One of many major issues going on in Minnesota right now, and that we'll be looking forward to in special session coming up again, likely this weekend. We will have a recording of this, I believe, posted on our website in coming days. If you want to learn more about what MnCEF is about, you can visit our website at mncef.com. And again, just thank you to those of you who came and to Senators Rarick and Senjem, and good night.